Hey everybody, sit down around the hearth, grab a frosty mug of ale. Welcome to the Lion's Pride Tavern, where we discuss all things Azeroth. This week's episode is brought to you by the Dark Moon Fair. Open October 2nd for 7 days straight. Meet Silas Darkmoon and his troupe. Play games that test mind and nerve, and behold exotic sights from the four corners of Azeroth and beyond. I am your host, Fafford. I play a Dwarven Beastmaster Hunter in the awesome game World of Warcraft. After our second weekend of raiding, we are getting a lot more comfortable working together at downing bosses again. But our professions are now lacking behind after leveling our main toons. So let's start off and introduce our panel. First off, we have Lorelei.
Hi, I'm Lorelei, your Night Elf Fury Warrior.
Next up, we have Epistle.
I'm Epistle. I'm a Denied Protection Paladin.
And tonight, Tappuccino returns.
Yay.
Hi, I'm Tappuccino. I'm your Resto Druid.
And our special guest tonight is Amia.
Hi, I'm a Draenei Discipline Priest.
Very good. And unfortunately, Joe Bowie, we think might have got the time zone messed up a little bit, so he's not with us, but he may join us in mid-podcast. And if he does, that's great. So, a few questions straight off for Amia, since you're our special guest. How long have you played WoW? Since what expansion?
I started playing WoW in Burning Crusade.
Okay. And how did you come to find this raid group?
Well, my husband and I actually started raiding with you guys through another group, and I think that those group of people have actually dissolved, but we've obviously stuck with you guys and joined the guild and everything. It's been a great experience, so lots of fun.
Yay, we stuck to it.
Yay!
What's your favorite mount, pet, or toy box item, and why?
My favorite pet, and I was trying to think about all these things, but it's the Sprite darter hatchling. I like it. I don't know. I think it's cute, and it looks like a little flying dragon. But it's one of those pets that you had to actually do quest after quest, and there were a couple like that. But I would have to say that one's my favorite, and you had to earn it. So
Yeah, cute's always good.
cute works for me. I mean, it's cute. It's got lots of colors. It looks like a little flying dragon. So
Is that like the little fairy dragon?
Yeah, the little fairy dragon. And now they have a mount, so I can actually also say that the mount, that the name is escaping me, but I can find it out. But that mount, it has to be like my favorite mount because it changes colors. So
Is that the Fey Dragon?
yes, yeah, that one.
That is a really cool mount.
Yeah.
So, what is the story behind your name?
Honestly, there's really not too much of a story, and except like part of the word is ami, which in French is friend, and it's just I think with the priest, I think I always thought a priest is a friend of all, especially if you're healing, and they have other players really should be to the good to the healer, if the healer's good to the other players as well. So that was it, and then I always kind of went back and forth with how you would actually pronounce it. I'm like, is it Amia, Amia? So it's really whatever, just don't call her late for dinner. Just kidding. But that was really it for me. I just liked how it sounded, and it had the French friend thing in there.
Yeah, cool. And it's tomato, Amia, Amia. What did you say? Amia, Amia.
It's either Amia or Amia because
Amia.
I really it's one of those things. One of my other tunes is just kind of like, how the heck do you pronounce the name? But I think it's to each their own, right?
Well, you're the one that owns it. It's your story. You stick to it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, before we started, we were talking, and I was asking you what race and class you were, and you said you were a space goat disciplined
Yeah.
priest.
hmm Yeah,
Give
yeah.
us the story behind that. Space goat.
Interesting
Well,
description.
Space Goat, way back before I was an Alliance, came over to the Alliance Toon side. We were in a Horde guild, and a few of us actually. There was one of the guys who was kind of like, "Hey, let's all make Drain Eyes, and we're gonna make a little guild." And it was only Drain Eyes, and we were just actually called Space Goats. So it was just kind of fun because they're blue with hooves, and so we just kind of went from there.
I have never heard that. That is so
No, it
cool.
was original, definitely original, and it was kind of funny having everybody that was in the guild was, and it didn't even last for. I think everybody kind of went their own separate ways, but I like the character, so.
Yeah, I had a guild that kind of broke up like that. I called it the Naked Guild, and nobody
Oh
would
my
run around with me.
god.
I was in a guild called Clothing Optional for a while.
I was in
So,
one called Should Have Pulled Out for a while, and
Oh my god.
yeah, that guy had a lot of kids. Don't know if that's appropriate for this content, but
well, it is now.
sorry.
Let's talk about our raid Friday and Saturday. I'm very impressed. I mean, for this group, we downed three of the raid bosses. We attempted the fourth. We kind of did it in a different order. We downed two, attempted the fourth, and then went to the third and killed it. So let's just start off with the very first one, the dragon boss. We'll start off with Lorelei. What was your opinion on that particular fight?
I think we did a great job on that one. Everybody was really good with where they placed their rot, and I think using that other strategy that we tried helped a lot in that respect. And that's just a really fun fight. I think we really got everything pulled together on that one.
So you're the one that kind of mentioned the strategy. Why don't you give us a little hint on what we did different this time?
We used the heroic strategy that my guild was using on it. I'm not sure where they found it, if they found it on Fat Boss or some other place. But a lot of times we do that. We'll pick the heroic strategy and then use that, and that way we're practicing and ready for when we go into heroics. And I think it just really made a better use of the room, which made a lot more sense than trying to face the boss in the opposite direction toward the door like we were doing before. And that's honestly how we started doing it too. But I think it just worked a lot better for everybody.
Yeah, so we turned the boss around instead of facing him towards where you come in, and because we found out for sure 100% that the tail swipe did not take effect for normal, so everybody could stack there. And then let's see, tank wise, Epistle, what was different when on that fight for you guys?
It wasn't too much different because the basic mechanic of running out, running it back in is a familiar approach. It was just that once we positioned it in a way that made it easier for everyone else, that helped. Of course, from a being healed perspective, it means you're running way out of the range of the healers, and then need to practice mitigation or self heals while you're there. But because of the predictability, it made it a pretty straightforward strategy. And I also agree with Lorelei. I think it's a great idea to practice, using techniques that you might use, strategies you might use at a higher level.
How about Tapachino from a healing aspect? What did you find different about that strategy?
I actually thought that it was a good strategy. Obviously we downed the boss, but it also gave us healers a chance to coordinate ourselves, something that we really didn't do too much of before. So we could coordinated, you're over here, you're on the left, you're on the right. The healers and I were contacting each other through, whispers to check on our different spells that we can use, like the Iron Bark and etc. So it was a good chance for us to, kind of get cohesive too, to kind of get to know each other a little better. We have some people that, we're not used to raiding with as much. So I thought that was a good opportunity for us to do that. It also gave me a chance to use I think no matter what the strategy was, but I think this one was probably a little better, to use my tranquility on the run, which I really enjoyed,
Yay!
you know. Yay! Yep, it was being able to run on the side and being able to take care of that one side with the DPS and the tanks was very useful. So I really liked the strategy, and I thought it made for a better healing team.
So one of the things from a ranged DPS perspective is when we first downed it last week, we kind of stacked up. We stayed within 8 yards of everybody. In this one, Lorelei suggested to spread out, and so the range could get back further. And what happened there was when the dragon did his breath, it randomly targets one DPS or heals. But when you're spread out like that, for ranged, it made it a little more difficult for me because I was in the breath longer than I liked. But it didn't hurt as bad because I think it was further away. I'm not quite sure if that's actually the way that works. Instead of staying so tightly grouped on its side, we kind of spread out a little more. And now I know, Amia, you didn't actually make it to this raid, right? You had real life?
Yes, I did. Grown
Yeah.
up work stuff,
Yeah.
but
But you'll be there. One of these days, you'll get in, and we'll get to you with the profession stuff, because I know you've been working a little bit on that.
yeah.
So that was pretty much it. I mean, we just changed up a few things. We downed it first pull. There really, it really didn't seem like it was that hard anymore. We did change up the fact that we made mention that when the dragon went to sleep, when Nathaniel went to sleep, to pour it on the DPS, and I think that really
Yeah,
helped. Now we
that
did
did seem
have,
to make a big difference.
yeah. Now we did have rot all over the room, so you had to do a little, zigzag running to get out of the rot. I noticed a few people were trying to jump over it, um, but no one died that I can remember. I don't think anybody did, and we got her down in the first pull.
I think we all survived that one.
Yeah, I think we did too.
I think when you first do a fight, you're always kind of paying attention to, or need to pay attention to, the survivability factors, and don't know what's really going to kill you. It's almost like you have to learn the colors, the shapes, the sequencing. And once you got that down, then you're a little freer to, pour on the damage.
Yeah, very true. The second boss we went to was Ursoc, the bear, and we changed up the strategy a little on that one too. So the first time we split two groups on either side, and then we tried to get the person who got it to run to one side or the other, depending on which color preference was the one we needed. And I believe, was it Lorelei? Were you the one that came up with that strategy too?
I think so.
Yeah.
And
So,
I'm just throwing out what we found that worked for us.
oh no, and
Um,
that's
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah, I like that strategy where you just the tanks again. It's almost like the dragon fight in a way. You face the boss toward the back of the room, and DPS just sits on his butt and just wails at him. And you break your group into two teams for soakers, one on the left, one on the right, and then you just keep switching back and forth between where the person goes who gets the gaze. And that's another one of those fights that to me has a very simple game mechanic to it, boss mechanic. It's the player mechanic that once you get it, it's great, and it just takes a little bit of time to get used to it and get into the kind of the rhythm of how to do it.
Yeah, because this one made you had to make sure the people knew whether they were odd or even.
Right.
And I think that was the big thing, is that if you weren't paying attention for whatever, you were off getting some food or something, and you came back and what group am I in? Um, it was important to know what group, because that was the group. We set a marker. They would run. The odd group would run to that marker, and the person that had it, no matter what side he was on, odd or even, ran out past the marker or saw we absorbed the damage. It was a piece of cake. I found it a lot simpler this time. It seemed like the tanks were having a little more problem than the DPS were, though. So, Pistol, why don't you explain that?
It's a bear of a fight. It's rough.
Pardon the pun.
Uh-oh.
The obvious joke. The problem with that is it's all about timing. When the debuff goes on the other tank, not on you. And so if you wait for deadly boss mobs to tell you, it could be, just a bit of a delay. But then there's also, because we're kind of on the edge of being comfortable until we get a little more gear, a little more armor, um, missing a second or two can make the difference between a tank going down or surviving. And there's also the factor, tanks always have to think about mitigation. When do you use it? And there's a couple times in that fight where I want to use mitigation, but if I do, I won't have it when I need it later. But then I have to figure out, is a healer running back and forth and not able to do the big heals that are needed? So it's a kind of a judgment call as to what you do. And a couple of times I've gone down just because I didn't time those just perfectly.
Okay, so let's talk about from a healing perspective, Tappuccino. Did you find it was harder? I mean, I know Durag's my son, and he told me after the fight, he's like, that bear just hits so hard.
It does. It does really hit hard, and it can be kind of hard to keep people up, especially if the healer is the one that's, got to run away from the group. Again, communication's the key, knowing who's going to be running and other people picking up the slack, so to speak. So I think in generally it was a good strategy. It was easier than the last one. We didn't have to run as far. And heals may have been tough, but we did it. We're getting better all the time.
Well, one thing about our group is that we have, out of 4 or 5 healers, 4 of them are druids.
Yes, the druids, it does help. We get a lot of tranks, get a lot of healing circles, and,
Yeah,
and that really helps.
there
We
was
can put
plenty
them
of
all over the place. Yep.
there was plenty of green circles to stand on.
Yep. And if you weren't standing one and you die, we're just laughing at you behind your back.
No.
Behind your
Or in
bark.
front of your
No.
face, really. So that I actually say, I love playing with a bunch of druids. We do have a lot of good, area of effect as far as heals go, and good dots. And if we coordinate it right, we can do really well keeping the raid alive.
So, Amia, we'll probably have to have you come back as a special guest again, and once you've gone through Ursoc and that, and give us a perspective from a disciplined priest, because all we're getting is a druid.
Right.
Yep, it would be nice to have a different perspective. And obviously,
Yeah.
Disc being, great with DPS and heals. It would be nice to hear from you about that.
Yeah, and that's what I'm actually. It's nice to be comfortable to get in there. I know with my schedule, it's tough to get in, but um, it's a big thing of why I really like the group is that you can get in as long as you know, do a little research and get in there, and know it's not so nerve wracking because that was a big thing for me before being in part of groups. It's like yes, you want to progress and you want to get there further, but there's also that little bit of a curve.
And don't get me wrong, like I said, I love the druids, but it's always nice to have the different types of healing from
Yeah.
other classes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, that's what I like with disc. The fact that as long as you're doing certain things, you can do. You have to do a little bit of damage to help the heals for the group. So you have that little bit of extra in there.
Yep, for the win.
Yeah.
So then, let's see. We went to the evil tree next, and how can I say
Trees
this?
are so misunderstood.
Its bark was definitely not its worst thing. The bite was worse.
Definitely worse.
So we tried the fat boss strategy, and I think we tried it twice and completely failed both times miserably. We did get a few of the mechanics down. I mean, we're learning it.
It did seem to me, from a tanking perspective, it wasn't all that tough. We kept on top of things we needed to, and even I don't think damage and healing, like the DPS and heals, were really taking too much damage. So it doesn't seem to me like we were having problem from that perspective. Like, did many people die in the first attempt before we got into the heart?
Well, I think the heals was not bad. I mean, it's pretty typical. Don't stand and stuff. put the circles down, get the huts down, and I think it's just, like you were saying, Fafford, just, the timing, the getting the stuff down faster, would have made a big difference. And I think the healing is very um, manageable if we can just, get the stuff down faster. The
Well,
timing I thought was kind of tough going inside the tree, and people are a little confused about going in, and it's pretty quick. So we have to get used to going in and getting out, in the right amount of time. But I think once we get that, we should, with that and the DPS, we should be fine.
I
all right.
agree. That's the first DPS check, and where the other fights have been more of, of a tank heavy thing, where the tanks really have to know what they're doing. On this fight, I think it's really that the DPS has to know what they're doing, and I'm not sure. I think maybe if we um, work on assigning and marking the things that we need to get down fast, everybody focuses on that a little bit more. That might help.
My little theory was that because I did it on LFR on DPS to sort of see, and it feels like it'd be very easy in that fight to run around a lot like a chicken with your head cut off and
Yep.
not do as much damage because you're kind of, should I move now? Should I stand here? Should I hit that? And that kind of pause
Yeah.
really slows down your damage. And my suspicion is that as people get more comfortable with what the priorities are, we'll be able to get the DPS up, which I think is the serious concern for us right now.
Yeah, I think the priorities, it's one thing to say it and to say this is what you have to do, but then to see it, when all this stuff's popping up, it's like you still have to maintain that priority list. And I think it got a little confusing.
Well, I just want to say, Joe Bowie.
Hey, folks.
Welcome.
Joe Bowie.
I think I had my times backwards.
we kind of thought that, but that's all right. So we were just talking about the evil tree. So we've already talked about the first two bosses. We're on the evil tree fail attempt. Give us your thoughts.
Well, like Lorelai was saying there, it is quite a bit of a DPS check because I mean, if you don't kill those tentacles quick enough, then they start to kind of build up, and some of them have some mechanics about them that are pretty important for us to counter and take care of, especially the corrupted tentacles. But then the devastator tentacles as well, they need to be interrupted while they do their thing at the same time. And things can just get pretty chaotic pretty fast if you're not keeping up with the DPS.
Yeah, and I really do think no. Unfortunately, Ask Mr. Robot, I use its metrics to look at the fight afterwards, and it's not up and working yet, as far as I know. I couldn't get it to work. So I don't know what the true metrics are on the fight. It's not recording it. But just from watching it, I would have to say the DPS definitely wasn't there. Now, I don't know if that's item levels or gear levels, or if it was
Or
just
the chicken
those,
factor.
yeah, or if, well, and that's what I was actually going with because uh, uh, typically when you get something that's chasing you, like in Gorefiend, you got the skeletons coming at you, the constructors. You run away, and now you've got this blob that you should run away from, but you need to kite it instead of run away and somebody kills it. And so it's a different little mindset, and I think that was a little confusing. Because then you got to bring all those blobs together at one point and then just nuke them as fast as you can right in front of the opening of the tree before you can get into the Tuma.
Yeah, there's another aspect to that as well uh, that does affect it because we have to kite them, especially with like caster classes. A lot of our abilities are stand in place dependent, and while we do have mobility to some degree, that does have a pretty dramatic effect on the DPS in general. Um, the other the other thing I noticed uh, on that particular fight is just it's partially a mechanics thing that it's gonna take a little time to get used to. Things like when we do get the corruption on us and we're dropping those little pools of corruption on the ground, we need to get used to taking those to the edge of the room and getting them out of the way of people. Uh, and then I think we'll also get down a little bit of a pattern cycle where we're kiting around those blobs until we've got 10 of them, and we'll bring them in and pop them. And then we're, in the meanwhile, taking down the mobs in the room, or taking down the tentacles, and I think there's like the one big mob that comes up, the nightmare or something. And
Yeah, the big skinny guy.
yeah, and then we'll get that pattern down as the DPS gets up. But I noticed like we had like about half of the raid was pulling DPS that I think is close to what we need, and then about half of the raid that wasn't, as far as the DPS goes. And I'm not like taking any any umbrage with those that weren't pulling the numbers, because I know everybody's still gearing up and they're still getting used to the new Legion expansion and all that. It's just going to be a matter of time, I think, and as we can get some of those folks geared up in like mythic dungeons and things like that.
Oh, I agree.
It's also a kind of a different thing that people are having to do, because I don't think a lot of DPS are really required to kite a lot. There's a few that do from time to time, but now suddenly everyone in the raid has to know how to do that, and so that's one more learning curve.
That's true.
Yeah, because I know hunters, we move on the fly and fight on the fly. Everything we do is we can be moving. So it's not difficult for us, but it's still a different mechanic. But like I said, when you get those eyeballs above you, you think, oh, I gotta run away and go somewhere, and instead of just keeping ahead of it, just keeping your calm and moving around until we're ready to bring all the blobs into one spot. So
At least they move very slowly, so the kiting isn't like so manic, because you can run away from them very easily.
yeah, and they don't get faster, And I think once people realize all this, then it'll come a lot easier for everybody.
Yeah, I got them quite a few times and had to bring them to the eye. And at first you're like, oh my God, what do I do? What do I do? I've got all the, I've got this mark on me, but, being in this raid group too was very, um, you guys just explain up, just bring it to the eye, and I just bring it to the eye, throw my circle down, and we're good to go.
Well, it's a learning experience for everybody. I mean, everybody's,
Yeah,
knowing that you can take your time.
right. And it's not a big panic, and you can slow them down. You can, you know that there are people there doing that.
And it might make it easier too. Since every raid has to adapt the strategies that we learn from people like Fat Boss to who we have, that we could always assign someone a melee to stay at the eye and help kill the eyes when the blobs when they come up there, and then people could get those down maybe a little bit faster, because I think a lot of people didn't realize that if it hits them, they're not gonna outright kill you. You can kill those little blobs pretty easily.
Right. And that makes a difference.
All right, so on to boss number 4. It's the Twin Dragons, and I cannot for the life of me remember the name. Somebody help me out.
Amaris, Lethon, and Terror.
Okay. Anyway.
Terrar.
Yeah. Tomato, yeah. 2 dragons.
Well, it's kind of a hard one to pronounce, I think.
Amaris, Lethon, and Terrar.
Yeah.
Well, how boring would it be if it was Bill and Ted?
I'd be all right with that. Really.
It'd be excellent.
So, in this one, let's see, our strategy, we split into 2 groups. The big thing, I think, was with the tanks again. They had to swap dragons at so many stacks.
Pressure was on.
Yeah. But I think people originally got confused because they started getting, oh, I have 8 stacks, I have 9 stacks. I heard that a lot.
Yep, from me too.
Once we told everybody, it's like, don't worry, it does, just you can have as many stacks as you want, which you can't. But I think that calmed everybody down to the point where it seemed like it was a little difficult for the tanks to swap. So we split two groups, one on one side, one on the other. We swapped dragons. Uh, the only really other mechanic besides staying out of stuff on the ground um, was the flower. And I think people weren't quite sure what the flower looked like at first. So it took us a couple attempts. I think we did, what, 3 polls, and on the third one we downed it?
I think
So,
so.
yeah, so we're going to start off with Pistol and let him explain the tanking side of that fight.
Well, the original thought was that we'd keep them separated from each other and have them face away from the raid, a little like the other two fights, actually. But then as the fight went on and we tried a couple times, we thought, we'll just keep the bosses at 90 degrees to each other, because they had the tendency, just with some of their abilities, to knock us back slightly, and we kept getting pushed further and further back in the room. So then as it went along, we decided, well, the 90 degrees stops that from being a problem, because when we switch, we can just realign and reposition. So it just made it a little easier for us. And still, the raid's not taking any damage from its frontal cone. The switchover was a little bit tricky to get the hang of. Dorg usually was pulling it over to me, but then I think as we got comfortable, it was just easier for both of us to run more or less at the same time, taunt the mob off of each other, and I think we got it down pretty quickly and pretty smoothly.
Well, I thought it was a really interesting mechanic because they've never, as far as I can remember, now you quote me if I'm wrong, that you've had to switch bosses like that where you taunt off each other. I mean, I know you always.
I've seen, sometimes it's like the boss and then an ad, and you have to switch it back and forth. Um, Last boss in Hummel was a little like that. So there's been situations where we've had to do a similar dynamic. So once it was, once we kind of realized this is something we've done before, it just looks a little bit different, then it was easier for us to just get that down.
Nice. Lorelei, how was it for melee DPS?
I think it was really good. I mean, that I think is a kind of easy DPS fight because you just sort of stay on the side of the boss or the back of the boss since there's no tail swipe either on that one. I think what people needed to get used to was when the tanks switched, people wanted to go with the tanks. And sometimes that's really hard to remember that I don't always have to follow the tank that I'm assigned to.
Right. Yeah, because then there's some ads that pop that you have to take out before they reach the other side and reach the other boss, because then I believe it heals that boss.
Yes.
So I know being ranged, I was busy trying to find the flowers, trying to kill off all the mobs. I mean, it was an easy DPS fight. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it was simplistic mechanics. The tanks seemed to have the hardest part of the whole thing. But how about from a healing perspective, Tap?
The healing wasn't too bad. Once, like you said, once people realized, like I was one of the ones that says, oh my god, I've got all these stacks. It's, I've got 8, 9, 10, and a couple of times, what is it, a stun, I believe, that you get if you get too many stacks. So when the tanks weren't switching, I'm like, oh crap, I'm going to get stunned. But once everything calmed down and we realized it's not going to hurt you, we've got the heals covered. It was pretty easy, I thought, to keep people healed if everybody stayed on their side. And I think we had the 8-yard range as well, which was pretty easy, I thought, to stay, to be able to stay away 8 yards. We had plenty of room to play around with, so it wasn't too bad. Once we calmed down, got used to it.
Anyone standing in the middle between the two bosses, though, that's the ones who got into trouble.
Yes. We're kind of getting hit from both sides.
You get stacked from both, yeah.
So you think we need to address that and make sure everybody stays further over? I mean, we did get the boss down. But...
Yeah, I'm not too worried about it. If there was a specific person who did it a couple times, I saw maybe 1 or 2 people, and this is how uncomplicated actually it was for us as a tank. Once we got the routine down, it was just, I could kind of look around the room, see what was going on, and see where people were. So as long as I kept an eye on the stacks, that was really the only main concern I had, and then handling the switch. Plus, I'm curious to know from Lorelei's perspective in Melee, what we tried to do was just do a little teeny swap so that there's a small gap between the switch, so that you could almost immediately pick up the new boss as it came in. Were you finding you could always sort of keep on one, or was there kind of a delay?
There was a little delay, but it's fine because that was when we had those. I saw little ads, and I knew about the big shadows, but the little ads would usually come out too, and we were busy taking care of those. And I think that's just again where people were like, "Oh, I have to sit on the boss," so they started following it, and then that would get in trouble when you're crossing the bosses.
Yeah, definitely.
How about
I'd
you?
have to say, oh, I'm sorry. I'd have to say for just starting this raid, we're doing pretty good.
Oh yeah, everybody's doing great.
Joe Bowie, you
Got
got
that bond
any?
down first.
Yeah. Joe Bowie, you got some input on this from a ranged DPS?
Well, first, I'd just like to comment on the artwork of the dragons themselves. I have a strong affinity for dragons. I really like dragons a lot. And they've really done a fantastic job on the artwork for the dragons in Legion. These dragons in particular not only looked great, but the models themselves were really well animated. In fact, there was one particular move that they were doing where they were tossing their heads left and right, like kind of like a dog shakes off water, and it was kind of the movement was meandering down their neck, looking very realistic, which I thought was really pretty awesome. It's a small detail, but I really liked it a lot. From the fight itself, it was pretty straightforward. I seemed to, even though I hadn't done the fight before, it seemed to all make sense. It was very intuitive. There wasn't a lot of confusion really. A little bit about the flowers. I wasn't sure what those looked like and that sort of thing, but it pretty much made sense. And I did wander a little bit too close in the middle at one point and got a couple stacks from the other dragon. I was trying to get a little closer to some of the ads that were moving across. But otherwise, aside from getting put to sleep a couple of times by some of those clouds, because I didn't realize they moved around at first, it seemed pretty straightforward and a pretty fun fight. I liked it.
Yeah, no, I have to admit, as a raid leader, I planned for Nathendria, I planned for Ursoc, and I planned for the Evil Tree. And when we did the Evil Tree 2 pulls, 3 pulls max, and went, let's go to another one, I went, oh crap, I haven't researched enough. So thank God, and I have to give them my best hats off, feather in your hat. Fat Boss has what they call a mini cast. So it's a really quick summary. It's like a 2-minute long video of everything you need to do really quick in 2 minutes. And so we took our 5-minute break. I watched it twice. So
Well, it really made you look good too there, Fafford.
now you know my
It was
secret.
it was a good call though to not keep wiping on the heart. I think we wanted to stay and keep going, but I think it was the voice of wisdom and people heard it that yeah, let's switch it up and try something else and see if we can be more successful.
Yeah, definitely.
I think we've got a few of the bosses that we can get to at the beginning. We're starting to get the rhythms down on it. We're starting to understand the mechanics. Everybody's starting to get used to the fights, and we'll be able to go into those week after week for right now, getting everybody geared up. And we take a couple of weeks of killing some of the other bosses, and I think once we go back and tackle the heart, we'll be a lot more prepared for it gear-wise and all that, which will help a lot.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. So, and I know Amia didn't make it to this raid, and so she doesn't have a lot of input. But we're going to switch tactics now. So we're going to talk a little bit about professions. We've been at it for a couple of weeks, getting our toons leveled. A week, after that was our first raid. I think everybody was like really concentrated on getting gear. Let the professions lax. Second week, okay, now we got one raid out of the way. We got we got one boss down, and the second boss was really close. Now with our second week of raiding, we got 3 bosses down, attempted 4. Now it's like, okay, we set back and take a breather, and oh, hey, we need enchants, we need flasks, we need all this other stuff. Where are you guys at with your professions, and which professions? We'll start off with Joe Bowie.
Well, I have tailoring and enchanting. My enchanting is coming along really nicely. I have a lot of nice enchants. I've gotten them leveled up to level 3 for the most part, not all of them. Uh, my tailoring, uh, you know, I don't know. I don't know what Blizzard was thinking with tailoring in this expansion. Tailoring seems like, for the most part, it's practically useless. And yes, there is some gear that I can make, but that gear is so extraordinarily expensive to create in the end, to get it up to a reasonable level that would be useful for something like rating or even like moderate rating. I think the highest level item level you can get it to is 850, and on top, and that's after investing a lot of time, a lot of money and energy into getting that gear at that level. And I've in fact, even the bags are worse than in previous expansion. Our largest bag that we got from Legion was a 24 slot bag, and we had
That's
30 slot bags from previous
Wow,
expansions.
that's horrible.
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
so
It's not worth making those.
no, it's not. In fact, I still make I make bags from Warlords of Draenor because those are the only ones that'll sell. There's nothing I can make in tailoring that is worth anything. In fact, there's even one item that uh, a lot of the other professions got various items that could like help in like open world PVE stuff. For example, leather workers got this harness that'll keep you from getting dismounted off your mount if you have the buff on you. Tailoring got one too. We got one that is this blanket that is for mounts, but in the description, all it says is that it makes you more comfortable on your mount. However,
Oh,
nobody can find any sort of effect that it does. It doesn't keep you on your mount if you get hit. It doesn't allow you to attack anything while you're on your mount. It doesn't let you gather any items while you're on your mount. Nobody can figure out what it does. It doesn't effectively do anything. Blizzard says it does something, but nobody can figure out what it does. So it seems entirely useless. So tailoring is just I almost wish I wasn't a tailor at this point.
well, it actually felt like that with the last expansion, kind of, because you could make things, but it there really wasn't a lot. It didn't really seem like it. It didn't feel like it had a point like it did in previous expansions.
But at least in Warlords of Draenor, I could make some gear that would help me get ready to raid. That was like easy enough to make. That was high enough level that I could like make it for my alts, or I could make a piece of gear for myself, and I could upgrade that piece of gear to a reasonably high level. In fact, I used some crafted gear in Warlords of Draenor from tailoring for quite a while until I found a piece that was better than that and replaced it. But in Legion, there's just nothing. And the gear that I can make that's low level would get replaced by simple questing or even doing a couple world quests for any of my alts. So I just don't see the point of it. Enchanting, on the other hand, has some really powerful stuff in it that sells very well and has some good stuff to it. It's pretty expensive to make some of that stuff. Some of the enchantments require me to acquire about a dozen purple items from the world or epic items, and then disenchant them so I can get enough materials to make a single enchantment. But the enchantments themselves are pretty powerful and pretty interesting and cool. Um, but yeah, so tailoring is I don't like it in Legion. Enchanting is pretty decent.
So one quick question about enchanting. So I'm an enchanter tailor also. What I found interesting with the tailor part is that right from the start, I played my hunter. My hunter has absolutely no professions. It's a gatherer. It had mining and herbal or skinning, and I changed it to herbalism to help our flask person out. But I found it interesting that with my hunter, even running around doing quests, just killing mobs, I'd come up with cloth that my uh, tailor could use. So right off the bat, when I brought my tailor in for the first time, and she's at like 105, so I haven't got her to 110 yet. I've already got like 250, 260 cloth that she has in her bag. But I agree with you. There's nothing that she makes that I can use because the next piece of equipment I get is better.
Yeah, and I'm right now. I had the shoulder enchantment to help me gather cloth for a little bit because I was thinking, oh well, I'll get something cool that I can make and sell in the auction house, or that will be useful for my alts, or something like that. And I gathered a lot of cloth, and I got cloth anyway from other mobs. I have, I think, 3,000 cloth sitting in my bank and nothing to do with it. And I just don't feel like doing it at all. I haven't even finished leveling up uh, the 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 tailoring because I just don't have anything to use the stuff on. Really, nobody wants any of the stuff I can make, and I don't blame them.
So my question was with the enchants. So I've got my stuff up to level 2. What is the secret to getting to the third level? Is it just questing? Because, like I said, she's only 105. So maybe I got to be 110 by the time it opens up that third level. I've gotten the second level open on both all my cloaking stuff and all my ring stuff.
There are two things. Well, actually, I think it's with cloth. It's primarily Nightfall and reputation. The Nightfallen uh, vendor in the main base in Suramar. I can't think of the name at the moment. It, she sells the level 3 for the imbued silkweave gloves and silkweave robe and things of that nature. Actually, I think it's actually the cinch, the epaulets, hood, slippers, and the the back or the cape back piece. It sells the level 3s of all of those. But some of the other ones, I think the others are all the pants, gloves, and robe. I believe are all acquired from doing the quests for the tailoring. But again, they only make an 815, and then it requires an enormous amount of resources and time to get those eventually leveled up 5 points at a time to 850 maximum.
And am I wrong to say that in order to get into Suramar, you have to be 110?
Correct. Yeah. Well, there is a quest I think that takes some classes there, or a couple quests that take some classes there briefly before they're 110. But it's just like a little side questy thing that they go there and then they leave there and they're not actually questing there.
Okay. Lorelei, how about your professions? What are you doing?
I am a miner and a blacksmith, so I've got lots and lots of mats. Um, I will say for the tailoring, you could probably make some money making imbued silkweave bracers because blacksmiths need them for a quest where you have to get one of 4 different kinds of items to finish out a quest to level up again. I have tried putting some things on the auction house and they're not selling, so I'm not really sure as far as gear. So usually gear doesn't do too well anyway, but I can make some relics. So I've just now put a couple of relics up on the auction house to see how they are going to sell. They're 805s. So I'm hoping that that'll be a little bit of draw for people who are still a little bit not quite 110 and getting the higher level things.
Now, can you make anything higher than 805 relics?
Not yet. I don't know if I can. I haven't looked that up yet. I just spent a lot of time just trying to make a demon steel bar because that was the next thing I needed to do, and there was a whole quest line you had to do just to get that recipe.
Gotcha. How about Epistle? What professions are you working on?
Same as Lorelei, blacksmithing, and we could kind of compare notes a little on that. I'm just about to pick up the recipe for consecrated spike, which is a pally relic. But again, low level, so it feels a little bit limited. I don't know if it opens up anything beyond that, but when I was doing research, not really. So I think just generally I would sort of echo having also another toon with tailoring, another with alchemy. That other than some functional things that come with a lot of these professions, the only one I'm really excited to get up is alchemy and maybe cooking, because those will have a raid benefit, and the rest all just seem really kind of meh for any kind of raiding benefit. And I've always had in the past excitement around, what's that key piece is going to take a lot of time to build, but it's going to be really useful. and I don't see anything like that. And nothing that's not going to be replaced in just one raid or one fortunate roll of the die that you get a mythic warforged. And it'd be sad to see your constructed gear disappearing so quickly.
Yeah. So Tapatino, I know you are alchemy and herbalism because you're my alchemist that I'm sending my herbs to. So give us your
Yes.
rendition.
Alchemy, I've been an alchemist since I started this game, and so I've always wanted to keep it up. I can make all the flasks now, there's 4 of them. The herbalism, it's kind of tough to gather all the herbs. I mean, obviously we're not flying yet, which is fine, but they're just few and far between at first. But as you gain, and I don't know if it's experience or rank, the herbs do seem to be coming a little faster. The problem with the alchemy, though, is that in order to get rank 2, where I don't have to go to Dalaran to make the flasks, that I can make them anywhere, or rank 3, where you can make multiple flasks, it's all in dungeons. All the drops, I can't just go buy a recipe for it. I have to go into a dungeon and hope that that it drops. But that being said, I make them not for the money, but for the raids and for the guild. Um, they're very useful. I'm working right now on the Spirit Cauldron so that at least we can put a cauldron down and everybody in the raid can, get a flask or 2. So,
So,
that's basically where I am on that.
so does the cauldron work cross-realm?
It does. You should be able to put a cauldron down and everybody should be able to take a flask. It's kind of, I forget which expansion it was, but we lost it in Draenor, and I'm not sure about the expansion before that, where you could be, everybody would get a flask. Now the difference though in this expansion is that the flask, once you log off, it doesn't stay in your bag. So that's hence it's called a spirit cauldron. As long as you're logged in, you can use the flask. But once you log out, it disappears. For guildmates, I've been making them for us anyways when we raid. Those are the regular crafted flasks, so that those don't disappear. Those will stay in your bag, and you log out, they're still there.
Okay,
So,
cool.
but I could probably make a ton of gold because the herbs are wicked expensive, the flasks are wicked expensive, but I don't. I do it for us to be useful.
And we love you for it.
Thank you, and I appreciate the herbs that you guys gather and send my way.
Speaking back on the relics that you mentioned, I think the relics are spread out amongst many other professions. I know that like the blacksmith can make some. I can make 2 with enchanting, but again, they're just 805s, and there doesn't appear to be any way to increase that value at all.
Are they pretty decent 805s?
Uh, the ones that I can create one that's an arcane one that it gives, I think it's a plus 31 modification of your item level, plus the plus a side effect on it. I can't remember exactly what the effect on it is, and I can also make a shadow relic that I don't know what the effect that it does, but again, it's plus 31 and it's stuck with just being 805. That one is purchased from a guy in Dalaran for a curious coin that occasionally drops it from dungeons.
Yeah, very good. I was just about ready to bring up the curious coin because I just finished my class haul. But before I do, I want to talk to Amia because she hasn't got to talk a lot because she didn't raid with us last weekend.
I know. That's okay.
But so your aspects on tell us what professions you're doing and what you're thinking about.
I'm also doing herbalism and alchemy. I just have started into the alchemy, so I'm not as far along as Tap is, but um, it is. I like the alchemy because it's useful. It's useful for everybody in groups and in the guild and whatever. And then the herbalism, it is tough. You just have to like. I always find myself like going around doing the world quest and everything, but then you stop because you're like, oh, there's a dot. It's like the
Yeah.
squirrel moment. You're like, oh, there's a dot. I gotta go pick that. I gotta go pick that. So
Flower.
there's flowers everywhere, and at least in when you're questing or you're doing stuff in Suramar because you're doing things for Nightfallen, which is obviously helpful. Not only will you get like your you'll pick your flower, but sometimes you can get the ancient mana, and you need the ancient mana for things. So it ends up working out, but you just have to. Just like anything else, it's like paying attention and just kind of perseverance.
So
For
is
sure.
is the ancient mana used in alchemy?
It's not used in alchemy, but it's used with like the Nightfallen quest, so it's kind of like that. I just kind of like branched off a little bit because that's what I do, but
Oh, yeah.
I just think it's nice that at least if you're in a certain area and you're picking flowers, there's something else useful for you if you happen to be in that area.
Gotcha.
Oh,
Gotcha.
I'd like to add too about alchemy. There is transmutations which you can do. Like in the old expansions, you could transmute things from like sources, air to earth, etc. Transmute to savage blood. In this expansion, you can transmute cloth to herbs, meat to pants, ore to herbs, skin to herbs, skins to ore. It's pretty cool. There's others as well.
Yeah, it looks like there's a lot of
Um,
stuff.
And in
yeah,
fact,
yeah.
because you said that earlier, I actually got one now on my alchemist, fish to gems.
Yeah, fish to gems. There's one meat to pet. You can actually create a pet once you get that recipe. It's pretty funny.
Well, so what it's doing then, if I'm reading this right, it's taking the other professions, which in layman's terms are useless, like Joe Bowie pointed out with the
All
tailoring.
that
But if
cloth.
you could take the cloth and convert it to herbs for the
Mhm.
potions, because what I'm seeing is flask potions and enchants are your number one items, and the rest of it's just kind of fluff.
Yeah.
So that's cool. So I'll have to start sending you my
Yep.
cloth and my meat, so you can make me a pair of pants.
Well, they're not really pants that you. I did try it. They're not like some big item gear that you'd want to have. But it's pretty funny that you could do it in the first place. Although I do use, I think the one I do, it's on a daily cooldown. The one I use every day is the cloth to herbs, because obviously I
Well, yeah.
want more herbs.
Yeah. So, but if I had meat pants, then I could be Mr. Gaga.
Oh my God.
I'm hoping the pet, I haven't done the pet yet. I haven't gotten that recipe or whatever you would call it, but I'm hoping that's something I'll be able to trade or sell or give away when
Yeah,
I do get it.
it's kind of funny with the tailoring. Most everybody seems to that at least that I've talked to tends to agree with the fact that it's just generally horrible in Legion. And I don't know why Blizzard has taken that tack where they're not making the professions equally attractive to players. Because, like you said, right now, enchanting, alchemy, those are super useful. They're making good money if you want to sell stuff. They're handy for raiders. They're really nice. And then some of the other ones are kind of falling short. And I really don't understand that. I don't know if that was an oversight on their part or if they thought. I don't know what they were thinking. I don't get it.
It's almost like they think that people don't want to do professions, but everyone that I know of loves to do the professions.
Well, now one profession we haven't really touched on and talking all this, because it sounds like we're all kind of doing the same ones, but is cooking. So, because I'm still using the old Draenor tables to set down for the raid, and I noticed last night I'd set it down and only like 2 people would even use it, where before, I mean, it was just like a mad rush when you put it down. Who's doing cooking, and what do you think?
Well, I'm doing my own cooking for my own food. I've got haste for 225 haste for one cooking ingredient I have, and 300 I just got today, the Suramar Surf and Turf. So
So,
I just make my own food.
is there a raid-wide table that's going to be able to be put down? Because I don't cook at all.
Yeah,
Well,
there
I've got
is.
the hearty feast, but it's kind of meh so far.
There's a hearty feast, yeah, that's 150 in a stat, and then you've got the lavish, Suramar feast, which is 200 in the stat for an hour, which is still better than the feast we can get in Draenor, which was 100.
But from what I've seen so far, the feasts that you can put down fall quite a bit short of the custom food or the more
Yes.
specialized food, which you can get 375 out of the high end uh, player made food, or just
Right.
singular food. I've been doing a lot of the cooking as well, but there's the only issue that I have is Nomi seems to burn up so many of my resources and not give me the recipes that I want him to give me.
Hmm.
Uh, I've I've gotten I can make uh, some really good food, but not the food that I need for myself.
And the one for the 375 haste, which is what I would use, that recipe, although I don't have it yet, calls for herbs, like all 5 of my different herbs. So I don't plan on actually going for that recipe unless I start really getting a lot of herbs.
Interesting.
Yeah, I
All
did
right.
the same thing. I wanted this one recipe, so I found out that you have to go kill a rare out in Suramar to get it, and that's kind of where I've stopped right now. I'm trying to get recipes, but like Jabui said, right now Nomi isn't giving me anything but just junk.
I did read that it the recipes that you get first what'll happen is if you give him the ingredient that a particular ingredient, if that ingredient is one of the ingredients that's used in a recipe that you want, you have a chance of getting that recipe, but it's partially dependent upon whether or not you have the recipe or a lower version of that recipe already in your recipe list as to whether he'll give it to you or not. And so you kind of have to give him particular ingredients to cook with and burn up endlessly before he'll eventually give you the recipes that you want. I've been trying to get the one is the Hungry Magister, which is 375 crit, uh, and I have not been able to get him to cough that one up for me yet.
Yikes.
Well, the 300, the one with the 300 haste, is the surf and turf. I actually went and killed things. I got one half of the recipe on one type of mob, and I got the other half of the recipe on another. And then when I put them together, I had the recipe for the surf and turf, which is the mid-range food for me. So they're not all done by Naomi. Some of them are done by quests or drops too.
Yeah, I
Well,
recently got the other half of that one myself. I had the surf for a long time, and I didn't know what dropped the turf, and then I found out that it was the deer in Suramar that drop it.
Yeah, those deer horn stags or something like that. It didn't
and I
really take
found that
that many to kill.
one of the tricks I use with Nomi is that I had once given them like 4 or 5 stacks of the same material, came back, and I had 2 copies of the same recipe. And that actually happened a couple days in a row. So I've just found that if I give them only one of each, and then rotate through them, and then I come back every so often, there's less likely to be that kind of duplication or wasted mats. But yeah, it feels like we're pouring in tons of resources for professions, and I'm curious if who's actually got any of their professions other than say fishing up to 800 already.
I have archaeology up to 800,
Woohoo.
um, but the
Herbalism is 800.
Oh yeah.
the with the tailoring, once you make a few of the tailoring items, which all I ever do with those is I make them and then I disenchant them. But once uh, at a certain point, if you only have the level 1 version of it, then it stops giving you any more skill points. And then you have to get the level 2 recipe before it'll start giving you skill points again. And then again, you have to get the level 3 recipe before it'll start giving you skill points again. So I have not completed the tailoring one yet. And the enchanting one, it just costs so much to make so many of the things that it's just going up rather slowly.
And that's always been the case with enchanting. I mean, I started my enchanters, my very first vanilla character, and I went enchanting tailoring, because she was a clothy. And man, enchantings, I mean, so basically all my toons would just send all the non soulbound items that they collected so she could disenchant them. And I did the same thing. I'd build cloth stuff and disenchant it just for the mats. But it is such an expense.
You know what's funny is that there seem I don't know if this is a bug or not, but when I make like the regular stuff, not the imbued silkweave stuff, but the regular silkweave stuff, it can turn out either blue, or it can get upgraded a little bit, and it'll come out as a purple with a slightly higher item level than the base one that you can make, which I think is still in the 700s. But when you disenchant that one, you actually get one of
The shards.
the yeah, one of the shards from back in Warlords of Draenor instead of any of the mats that you would use from Legion.
Yeah, I didn't understand that at all.
I think it's a glitch or some problem with some oversight or something.
That might require some research, to see if that's actually what's going on. So last question, because we got our hour in already. I want to end with the same one that we always do, and we'll start with Joe Bowie. Any add-ons you'd recommend to our listeners?
Aside from ones we've mentioned in the past, which I would happily mention it again, which is World Quest's list, that is a great add-on. But as far as new ones go, I haven't come across any that I've found essential that are new lately.
Okay, Epistle?
I'd say the same thing. I've played around with and appreciated Pawn the more I'm using it, but otherwise nothing new.
Lorelei?
I have a purely just appearance-based one, and that's called Mogget. And it lets you look at every item that the game has put out from level 1 to level 110, and you can put together outfits that way. And it'll tell you where to find it, if it's crafted, or if it's a vendor, if it's a world drop. It takes a long time, but if you want to make a particular specific kind of outfit, you can use this.
Oh, Joe Bowie's going to get that one.
There you go.
I'm actually there myself.
I've used that one in the past, but I found that the new appearance guide, like when you open that, does most of the things that I wanted to do that I was doing with Mogget in the past, because it tells you like that it's like a world drop. It doesn't always tell you exactly where something drops, but or where it comes from. But for the most part, I've just been using, lately at least, the built-in collections appearances tab.
Yeah, I really like that new one.
That one's good for the things that you have. Yeah, I didn't realize I had so many things until I opened that up.
Well, it actually shows you the things you don't have too, actually. If you open it up on there, when you open it up from a vendor or from the transmogger, it only shows you the things that you have. But,
right.
But when you open it from just your collections button down on your interface, you can scroll through and it'll show you all the things that you don't have as well, and then you can.
I think they're more grayed out.
Yeah, they're more grayed out.
Yep.
Oh yeah, you can click on not collected or collected.
Yeah.
Mogget is a great add-on, and I have used it. I just haven't been using it lately because I've found this to be sufficient for what I needed. But
Well, with Mogget, though, you can put together a different boot with a different bracer, where with the Blizzard one, you're just looking at all the different bracers, and then you have to look at all the different boots. It doesn't actually keep what you've looked at prior, does it?
well, I mean, you can control click the items in the interface for appearances, but it's not as robust as Mogget, where you can create wish lists and put together outfits and save them, and all that sort of thing. Mogget definitely has a lot more features than the built-in stuff, uh, but it's. I mean, you can like preview the various items together by clicking in the different tabs, and then like control clicking on the item you want to see in the preview on your character. But like I said, you can't save it or anything.
Right. Tappuccino, you got a add-on?
Well, I don't know if we had mentioned it before, but I know getting from you guys the add-on pawn has been like very useful. Where you can see if a gear is going to give you an upgrade or not, or if it's having to choose two pieces, which is worth more gold, just at a glance. And I think that's been a very useful add-on since you guys told me about it.
How about Amia?
I really enjoy the world quest list just because you can just pull open the map and just see everything and go do it if there's particular things that you need more. I don't have pawn yet, but I was thinking about adding it. But I mostly just use the world quest list.
Well, what's really cool with pawn is that if you're leveling, now I'm leveling my mage right now, and with pawn, if you go in and you get the right weight stats and enter those in, when you pick up an item, you can just look at a glance to see if it's a percentage upgrade to what you already have, according to the weights that you're doing. So, you literally just, it's a quick glance and you're like, nope, that's not better than what I have. You don't even have to worry
Yeah,
about
it
it.
sounds super helpful.
Yeah. So one of the ones that I use a lot is Monocle Equipment Compare. So what that does, and I don't know if anybody else uses it, but you mouse over the item you got, and it'll show you, like if you mouse over your ring, if you just get a new ring, it'll show you your 2 rings that you have, and it's kind of like what Pawn does, but you can look at them. It'll show you the 2 rings that you have equipped and the new one that you're looking at. And then I think it's Pawn that actually does it, but it'll tell you if you put this on, you're gonna lose stam, you're gonna lose versatility. It's got the negatives if you wear it. And then of course now that I've set the stat weights, Pawn will actually tell you percentage upgrade. But I like Monocle Equipment Compare just to see the difference between the two. If nothing else, just to view what it looks like. Has anybody else ever used it?
I haven't heard of
No,
that one.
I haven't heard of it.
Nor I.
Yeah,
No, I haven't.
because before I had Pawn for quite a while, but I didn't know about the stat weights, and so Pawn I use strictly to look at somebody else and see what their item level was, because you could do an inspect on somebody, and Pawn down in the lower right hand corner on the inspection would tell you what their item level is. So if you're gonna in a raid check everybody's item level to see if they were geared enough, or why is this person's DPS not so high, you could go inspect them, and it would tell you they're an 815 or whatever. And so I used Pawn strictly for that until Joe Bowie turned me on about the weights, and then I totally changed that. So Monocle's probably kind of an older add-on that if you're using Pawn, you probably aren't going to want to use it, but it's pretty cool if you're looking at it just for a transmog aspect.
There's another one that I would recommend. I haven't been using it lately because I haven't been playing any gathering classes, but if someone's playing a gathering class, Gathermate, and with Gathermate data is almost an essential. That can really speed that up and make it a lot easier to find resources if you're mining or doing herbalism, things of that nature.
All right, anybody else got one that they thinking about that they should throw out there to our listeners?
Well, I'd like somebody to upgrade one called Extractor, which I used for years, and it lists all the herbs and ore and leather and which areas you could find it in, and how many nodes per that section, so you could go out and if you had to farm something, you knew where to go to get it. But they haven't upgraded that one since what's the last
Cataclysm,
what's the
wasn't
last
it?
thing we did? Cataclysm.
Yeah, Cataclysm.
Yeah, I'd really
I-
like somebody to pick that one up again. It's a very simple one. You just hover over it.
I used that one a lot. That was awesome.
Do you?
But
Very
yeah,
few
Cataclysm.
people know about that
Yeah,
one.
Cataclysm was the last one on that one. It required a lot of data, and that's one of the things when you start collecting data, especially with add-ons, it starts adding up really quick into the megabytes of information that it's storing. And I think they probably got away with not using it anymore because it would really slow it down, because WoW's got so more advanced than it was before, better graphics and everything, that having something like that just collected data, really slowed people's computers down. And I remember when I had one problem, the first thing the guy told me when I called Blizzard was, well, first of all, get rid of all your add-ons and then see
Yeah.
how it's like, because they don't even want to deal with those. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe I need to get rid of that.
A lot of the overhead from add-ons, eating up memory and things of that nature, diminished significantly over the last like 4 or 5 years as the amount of memory in computers has gone through the roof. It used to be where we'd be running around with, a gig or 2 gigs of RAM or something like that, where every megabyte mattered for the most part. But nowadays, a lot of computers have 8, 16, 32,
Yeah.
even more sometimes. And so like the add-on data, like all of my add-ons right now is eating up 44 megabytes on my machine, which is that doesn't even begin to touch the RAM in my machine really. So it's not as bad as it used to be.
Oh, and I agree that because I run about 128 megs in add-ons, and that doesn't affect my play at all anymore. So I thank you guys for coming again, Joe Bowie. I'll make sure I'm a little clearer on the time next time. I think that
I
was my mistake.
It was kind of my fault for some reason. I I don't know the time. I had the numbers backwards in my head, and so I was thinking it was going to be like 2 hours, well, actually like 4 hours different, or 2 hours different on that. I thought it, and so I was sitting there and I was getting ready to go do something else, and I popped open my computer, and then I saw a message from Lorelai saying, "Hey, are you coming?
That's
I already started."
that's
And I
funny
was like,
Yeah.
because uh, Epistle sent you a text, Lorelai sent you an email, and then I think
I
Tap.
sent it to him on Facebook.
Oh, on Facebook. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
"Yeah, I was just checking. Yeah, I just stopped in to check on Facebook posts that I had made earlier today just to see if anybody had commented or anything, and then I saw that message from her, and I was like, "Oh no, I'm missing the podcast. I better get on there."
Nice. All right.
It's well, it just goes to show you that we're all from all over the country come
Yes.
together, to bring you this podcast.
All right. And speaking of that, I think we'll call it a night. So thanks everybody
All
for
right.
coming.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Good
See you
night,
Thank
next
you.
everyone.
time.
If you like this podcast, throw us a like and subscribe to our channel. And please leave comments or questions below. Maybe we'll answer them on the air next podcast. We are hosted on Podomatic.com. Our website is lionsprideTavern.podomatic.com. Our podcast also airs on iTunes for Apple users, Google Play for Androids, and YouTube. Just search World of Warcraft Lions Pride Tavern podcast. See you next week, and thanks for listening.